The only heads that look like they're going to roll anytime soon could be anyone who, I mean, particularly older people, whose properties have reached too high a value, because the Chancellor looks like she might want to introduce a mansions tax in the budget.
That would mean that anyone who owns, for instance, a property worth more than £2 million, although we don't yet know where Rachel Reeves would put that bar, but say it's a house worth more than £2 million, they would face paying an awful lot more to the Treasury. Probably the difference, a much higher tax rate on the difference between the £2 million and whatever it is then valued. And who values it anyway?
Well, exactly.
How do you know how to value it? Nobody in the housing market at the moment seems to know how to value a home. A flat one of my sons was looking at it said between 500,000 and 625,000.
Oh.
I mean, that's a ridiculous between.
Well, yeah, but you also know if the government was looking at something like that, they'd go for the higher figure.
Well, yes, of course.
But that means
that suggests that not even the estate agents know how to value a house at the moment because nothing's shifting.
Picture this. You have spent 40 years working, paying your national insurance, and dreaming of that golden era where the most stressful part of your day is deciding which biscuit goes best with a cup of Earl Grey. You finally get there, only to find the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, standing over your shoulder with a calculator and a hungry look in her eye. It is the political equivalent of being invited to a dinner party, being told it is a bring-your-own affair, and then having the host charge you a corkage fee for the wine you brought yourself. We are talking about the absolute shambles that is the new two-tier tax system for Britain's pensioners, a policy so convoluted that even a news host with a penchant for basic arithmetic managed to tear it apart on live television. Quick favour, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show. The fiscal dragnet. Why your pension is shrinking. Let us start with the culprit behind this entire mess, the frozen personal allowance. Now, in the world of Westminster, fiscal drag sounds like something you might do after a particularly heavy night at the Carlton Club, but in reality, it is a silent, stealthy way to pick your pocket. The income tax threshold is currently locked at £12,570. It has been there for ages, and Rachel Reeves has decided it will stay there until at least 2030 or 2031. It is like trying to fit into your favourite pair of jeans from 20 years ago. The jeans haven't changed, but everything else, inflation, wages, and indeed pensions, has expanded. This frozen threshold is designed to drag millions of Britons into the income tax net without the government ever having to stand at a podium and say, "We are raising your taxes." It is the coward's way of increasing revenue, and for the first time in history, this net is closing around the state pension. By April 2027, the full new state pension is set to exceed that frozen £12,570 limit. Think about that for a moment. The state is giving you money with one hand and immediately demanding a slice of it back with the other. It is the height of absurdity. We are about to witness hundreds of thousands of pensioners who never expected to see a tax return again being hauled into the tax system, creating a bureaucratic nightmare for an already overstretched HMRC. Rachel Reeves, however, claims to have a simple workaround. Now, whenever a politician uses the word simple, you should immediately check your wallet and head for the nearest exit. Her solution is a loophole where pensioners whose only income is the state pension will not have to pay income tax on it during this parliament, even if it creeps above the personal allowance. It sounds jolly, does it not? A nice little shield for the elderly, but as soon as you scratch the surface of this simple plan, you find a tangled web of unfairness that would make a Victorian the two-tier trap, new pensioners versus the old guard. The real genius, and I use that word with heavy sarcasm, of the Reeves plan is that it creates a two-tier Britain. You see, there isn't just one state pension. That would be far too logical for our civil service. There are two. We have the new state pension for those who retired after April 2016, and the basic state pension for the older generation. Thanks to the triple lock, the new state pension is set to rise to around £12,862 by 2027. That is £292 above the personal allowance, which would normally trigger a tax bill of about £58. Under Reeves's plan, these new pensioners get a free pass. They are excused. They get to keep their 58 quid for an extra bag of coal or a nice leg of lamb. But what about the older pensioners, the ones who retired before 2016? Well, they are currently sitting on the basic state pension, which is much lower, maxing out at about £9,615 from this coming April. On its own, that is well below the tax threshold. So no problem, right? Wrong. Because millions of these older retirees don't just live on the basic pension, they get top-ups like SERPs, the State Earnings Related Pension Scheme, or the state second pension known as S2P. These were designed to compensate people for lower basic rates. Here is the kicker. Under the Chancellor's simple workaround, these top-ups are not shielded. If an older pensioner's total income from their basic pension and their SERP's top-up goes over £12,570, they get hit with a tax bill. Meanwhile, the person who retired a few years later on the new state pension, potentially receiving more money in total, is shielded from tax. It is a blatant discrimination against the oldest members of our society. It is as if the government is saying, thank you for your decades of service, but because you retired at the wrong time, we are going to tax you for the privilege of being elderly.
Today's budget builds on the choices that we have made since July last year. To cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living, and to cut debt and borrowing. No doubt we will face opposition again, but I have yet to see a credible or a fairer alternative plan for working people.
The HMRC nightmare, a system on the brink. Can we talk about the logistics for a second? Because this is where the news host truly began to dismantle Rachel Reeves's credibility. Imagine being an HMRC officer trying to explain this to a 90-year-old grandmother. Yes, Mrs. Higgins, your neighbour is exempt because they retired in 2017. But because your pension comes from a different pot created in 1985, you owe us £40. No, I don't know why. Ask the lady in the red suit in Downing Street. This policy is going to pile immense pressure on a tax system that is already held together with sellotape and good intentions. We are moving toward a situation where the cost of collecting the tax from these pensioners might actually exceed the revenue generated. It is fiscal madness. We are creating a pensioner tax that targets the very people who have the least ability to go back to work and earn more to cover the cost. Reeves is branding this as simplicity, while simultaneously layering on complexity that would baffle a quantum physicist. The Chancellor's plan does nothing to help the millions of older pensioners who already pay tax because of their small additional pensions. It ignores them completely. It is the Labour Chancellor at her finest, announcing a relief that only applies to a specific demographic while leaving the most vulnerable retirees to navigate a fiscal minefield. Older pensioners will feel abandoned again. They are the generation that lived through the hardest times, and now they are being told their pension top-ups are fair game for a government that is desperate to plug a black hole of its own making. The interview that ended the simple myth. The moment the news host really destroyed Reeves was when they pushed her on the definition of total income. If you have a tiny private pension of, say, £20 a month, money you saved yourself to ensure a bit of comfort that ruins your eligibility for the shield, you are suddenly a taxpayer. The message from the Treasury is clear. Do not save, do not have top-ups, and do not retire before 2016. It is a policy that punishes prudence. If you worked hard and added to your SERPs or CES 2P, you are taxed. But if you rely solely on the new state pension, you are fine. It is a bizarre inverted world where the more you tried to prepare for your retirement, the more the government wants to penalise you for it. The news host didn't just ask questions, they held up a mirror to the absurdity of a two-tier tax system based on your date of birth. Reeves struggled to explain why an older pensioner on £13,000 including top-ups should pay tax, while a newer pensioner on £12,800 should not. There is no moral or economic argument for it. It is purely a result of sloppy policy-making and a desperate attempt to avoid the political fallout of taxing the state pension directly. By trying to find a clever loophole, Reeves has instead created a giant neon sign that says incompetence.
I mean, you've had a terrible start to your job, haven't you? I mean, the winter fuel allowance debacle, which is what it was, and massive U-turn. Of course, on a personal level, you had the accusations of exaggerating your personal CV, the row over all the freebies that you accepted, and you and I have exchanged questions and answers about that, so I won't go over that again. You're less popular now than Kwasi Kwarteng was after the Liz Truss car crash budget. Do you not wish you'd done things a bit differently in this first year?
I faced a difficult inheritance when I became Chancellor last year. There was a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. The previous government was spending money it didn't have, and I had to make a number of difficult decisions. But that's my responsibility as Chancellor, to make sure that the sums do add up, because if they don't, you end up going the way of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, crashing the economy, sending mortgage rates through the roof and putting people's pensions in peril. And I'm never going to take those risks with the public. public finances. But it does involve difficult decisions, but I'm not going to shy away from those because that is my job as Chancellor. And yesterday, because of the decisions that we have made, we were able to allocate more money for health, more money for defence and more money to build the homes that our country desperately needs.
Despite
And so
all of that,
I think people will see yesterday a real focus on the priorities of the British people.
Relatable analogies. The birthday party from hell. Think of it like this. You are at a community birthday party. The organizer, Rachel Reeves, announces that anyone born after 2016 gets a free piece of cake. Everyone else has to pay for their cake. But then she adds a rule. If you brought your own napkin from home, you have to pay double for the cake. It makes no sense. It creates resentment between the guests. And the organizer spends the whole afternoon trying to explain why the napkin bearers are the problem. That is exactly what this tax policy feels like to the British public. It is a divisive, poorly thought-out mess that targets the very people the Labour Party traditionally claims to protect. The older retirees are being treated as a secondary class of citizen. And for what? For a tax bill of £50 or £60 per person. Is the reputational damage and the administrative chaos really worth such a measly sum? The news host certainly didn't think so, and neither do the millions of pensioners currently looking at their April 2027 forecast with a sense of impending dread. The pacing of this collapse in credibility is breathtaking. We went from the grown-ups are back in the room to we are taxing 90-year-olds because of a SERP's top-up in record time. It is a bold move to alienate the most consistent voting demographic in the country, but Rachel Reeves seems determined to see it through. It is almost as if she wants to test the limits of British patience. The conclusion: a short-term fix with long-term pain. As we head toward 2027 and beyond, this story isn't going away. Every time the triple lock kicks in, more pensioners will hit that frozen 12,570 mild. Every time they do, the absurdity of the shield for some and the bill for others will become more apparent. Rachel Reeves might think she has found a way to bridge the gap, but she has actually dug a hole that is getting deeper by the day. The British Report will be here to track every twist and turn of this fiscal circus. Whether it is a simple workaround or a complex catastrophe, we will bring you the facts with the sharp wit they deserve. Because if we didn't laugh at the sheer nonsense coming out of the Treasury, we would probably all be crying over our frozen personal allowances. Thank you for watching.